I write in, I think, a very character-led way. Josh, as a character, kind of lived in my head for about a year, really, I think, if not more, before I started kind of getting ideas down on paper. And when I did start typing, kind of starting at the beginning and moving onwards, his voice came out pretty well formed and pretty kind of complete, I guess. It's very much Josh's story. It's told from his point of view. And I guess, you know, I wanted to kind of maintain that and keep that kind of, you know, those more moralistic interjections, that all-knowing voice. I wanted to keep that to a minimum, I suppose. I knew roughly where I wanted to get to at the end. I knew the kind of journey I wanted Josh to go on, but lots of the book emerged as I was writing it. I think that happens quite a lot. The characters do things you don't expect them to do. They say things you don't expect. They find themselves in situations you don't expect. And I wasn't expecting it either. There's a scene in the book about 2/3 of the way through where Josh's loyalty to this kind of far-right group gets tested. And I absolutely didn't see that scene coming at all. I was writing what I thought was a nice little, you know, Saturday afternoon in the park scene with some friends of Josh's, and these two nasty characters turn up. And kind of events took their course, I suppose. 2 hours later, when I finished typing, I kind of was very much, whoa, where did that come from? I think I started off wanting to tell a story that I wasn't sure was being told. The narrative of radicalisation was so often kind of otherised, was kind of placed into that camp of, you know, this is not something that we as white people have to deal with. We don't get radicalised. We are the people that are radicalised against. But the fact that, you know, young white men are now the single biggest ethnic group being referred to prevent, and you know, there have been several recent very high profile kind of plots that have been foiled by the police against white supremacist groups, means that, you know, that's not the case at all. That it is something we need to be talking about. It is something that happens, and so I think I wanted to show that it does and can happen in kind of Middle Englandshire, I guess, you know, has the potential for these undercurrents, is what I wanted to show out the book. I would very much like readers to have connected with Josh and to have formed an opinion of him, of what he does, of why he does it, and to kind of come to their own conclusions by the end of the story about whether he is forgivable or maybe even likeable by the end of the story. I didn't want Josh to be a character who's kind of squeaky clean and blameless and this kind of poor victim that gets kind of sucked along on a journey that isn't, at least in part, you know, his doing, really, that he embarks on this willingly at the very beginning. And he does things in the book which are horrible, and he thinks things which are horrible in the book. And so I guess I wanted to kind of to test that, perhaps. But I'm also very interested in empathy, in whether or not these people are people we can still make a connection with, and in redemption as well. And kind of, I think, you know, it's simple answer. I would love readers to get out of the book that this is a you know, a realistic experience, something that is believable. That Josh is a kind of conduit into that story. By far the hardest things to write were the sections where Josh has been sucked into this world of far-right extremism. I mean, firstly, just from a research perspective, even just skimming the surface of that world is pretty sickening. And there's some kind of horrible things kind of you know, floating around the internet. Mostly it was kind of difficult to present a character in that situation who's acting as if he believes what he's reading and what he's being told, but that belief is also only kind of very superficial, is a very thin kind of belief system that Josh is holding on to, and he knows it at times as well. He's not fully convinced by it, and often in the book he's trying to convince himself and trying to trick himself into believing it. That was hard to manage. I mean, I hope I did manage it, but that was a hard thing to try to manage. I think the easiest things to write were the relationships that Josh has, particularly the ones that with people to whom he's closest. So the relationship with his mum, the relationship with Dana, those came pretty easily. Like I said, these fully formed people live in your head, I think, as a writer, and they talk to each other constantly. And so when it comes to kind of putting that down on the page or on the screen, it's quite easy when you're kind of already confident with these voices, you're comfortable with them, you know how they sound, their mannerisms, what they do, and kind of when they interact. Also, the action sequences were great fun to write. They really flew out. The kind of feeling Josh's energy in those sections, his adrenaline was exhilarating in a way, whether it be kind of, you know, he's terrified in a few occasions. The problem there, I think, it was kind of making sure that the reader stays alongside the action, and making sure that Josh notices enough of what's around him, and is describing enough to let the reader into the story. What did you learn about yourself? But I think what I've realised about myself, coming from a poetry background, is that I really enjoyed wallowing in that description, and kind of creating that atmosphere. With poetry, you've kind of got to go and hit the nail on the head and kind of take the most direct route to an idea. Whereas with novels, you can write around things, come at them from different angles, and you can stay in them for a lot longer, and your reader will kind of stay in there with you for a lot longer than with a poem, when you've just got to kind of, you know, get in, get done, get out again. So I think just that kind of idea of opening up, perhaps. I say that there are bits of the novel that are really very terse, very stripped down, which is kind of very similar to the poetry I write, I suppose. But generally speaking, yeah, it was nice to have that opportunity to kind of, you know, to enjoy and to develop and to kind of live in a character and a mood and a place and a time for a lot longer than you would in a poem. It took about a year to get a first draft complete that I was happy with. I was writing 1 day a week. I'd gone part-time at work, and I was trying to get 5,000 words down each day that I was writing, and I was managing that. But when that's done, obviously it needs the kind of next stage, the editing, the reworking. It was then accepted by an agent. Jane Finnegan at Hinton Rubenstein took it on. We spent about another year or so tinkering with it before we sending it out to publishers, and then Firefly happily took it on, and we've spent probably about a year kind of working on the manuscript, getting everything just right, getting it where we wanted it to be. And the whole process from when I started writing the book to it coming out in the real world, it's probably been about 4 years.